welcome to the Pacho Perspective, a place where I share my perspective on everything in the space between life and death. I am your host, Pacho. Well, my Pachos, Chachos, it is that time. We are indeed today going to be going over William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scenes 1 and 2, a.k.a. the balcony scene. So let's get started. Act 2, Scene 1 begins in a lane by the wall of the Capulet orchard. If you remember, Act 1 ends with both the lovers discovering who the other one is, and again, not really caring and being inclined to suffer whatever consequences come at what may for loving your enemy, or supposed enemy, right, as we talked about. And they're in love, right, instantly. It must have been some really good kissing, and they zinged, I guess, like in Hotel Transylvania's. And so Romeo, he just can't tear himself away. He can't stop thinking about Juliet, obviously, right? He's got some kind of obsessive personality traits, right? With the way that he was just, lovesick over Rosaline. And so, I don't see why it would be any different with Juliet. So, of course, he kissed her. He found out who she is. He still doesn't care. And that's where we are. And so enter Romeo alone on stage. And so we can imagine he just left the Capulet party, which is why he is still by their wall. And Romeo says, "Can I go forward when my heart is here? Turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out." In other words, he's saying, how can I go when Juliet is there? I'm a dull planet right now, and I need to find my core, the heat that keeps, life existent, I guess, right on the planet. Man, that's pretty good. So he climbs the wall and leaps down within it, which basically means trespassing, breaking and entering. Imagine if any of the Capulets find him. I mean, it's going to be pretty dangerous for him, but c'est la vie. That is the way love is sometimes. It gives us courage. And so now on the stage enter Benvolio with Mercutio. So we can imagine, right, that they were all leaving together, and then Romeo kind of snuck ahead to basically execute his plan, which was to jump over the wall and go see if he can, with any luck, find Juliet in the mansion. And so Benvolio screams out, "Romeo! My cousin Romeo, Romeo." And Mercutio responds, "He is wise, and on my life hath stolen him home to bed." Benvolio says, "He ran this way, and leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio." He says, "Nay, I'll conjure too," right? So I'm not going to just call him. I'm also going to conjure him like you conjure spirits using a Ouija board. And he says, "Romeo, humors, madman, passion, lover, appear thou in the likeness of a sigh. Speak but one rhyme, and I am satisfied. Cry but I me, pronounce but love and dove. Speak to my gossip Venus one fair word, one nickname for her pure-blind son and heir, young Adam Cupid, he that shot so trim when King Cophetua loved the beggar maid. He heareth not, he stirreth not, he moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. I conjure thee by Rosaline's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the demesnes that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us," right? And so here Mercutio, being one of the boys, knows that if he talks a little crass about Romeo's love, Romeo, as an honorable man, is going to jump out and defend her honor. But he doesn't understand, right? This is dramatic irony now. We know something that Mercutio and Benvolio do not know yet. We know Romeo is over Rosaline. And so conjuring him using Rosaline's sexuality is no longer going to conjure him at all. If anything, if you wanted to conjure him, I guess you would have to use Juliet's sexuality to bring him out. But he doesn't know that. So he just assumes that he went to bed because he's love-struck and lovesick and sad that he saw Rosaline there and couldn't talk to her, didn't talk to her, and went home to cry again. And Benvolio says, and if he hear thee, thou wilt anger him, right? These things you're saying, remember, this is a prudish time. You didn't talk about another man's woman this way. Especially, the Demesnes that they're adjacent lie, we're talking about the oasis that all men dream of, real men. So this starts to get Mercutio upset because he wanted his friend there. I mean, you have to imagine they're at a party, he was dancing, maybe there was some drinking, and his best friend just totally left. And so Mercutio says this cannot anger him, right? He can't be upset that I'm doing these little perversions. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down. What were some spite? My invocation is fair and honest, and in his mistress's name I conjure only but to raise him up. You gotta love the puns in this play. And Benvolio says, come, he hath hid himself among these trees to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark. Right? And so again, kind of like what Benvolio said to Romeo's mother earlier in Act 1, he wants to be left alone. So just leave him alone. And so Mercutio says, if love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Nor will he sit under a medlar tree and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Oh, Romeo, that she were, oh, that she were an open etc., thou a poprin pear. Good Romeo, good night. I'll to my truckle bed. This field bed is too cold for me to sleep. Come, shall we go? And Benvolio responds, go then, for 'tis in vain to seek him here. That means not to be found. Exeunt. Right, and so that's the end of scene 1. Very short. Right, and it's just setting up again that dramatic irony, right? That they still believe Romeo is in love with Rosaline, although we know that that is no longer the case. They think he is love-struck. We know now that he has new wings to fly, right, because of love. And forward we march. Scene 2 of Act 2. In the Capulet's orchard, enter only Romeo. And so in response to Mercutio's callings, because he did hear everything, but he just didn't respond because obviously he has things that he wants to do. And so he says to himself, he jest at scars that never felt a wound. Right? In other words, Mercutio's never fallen really in love with a girl, and so he doesn't know what that feels like to be denied. And so, he's saying he's just making fun of things that he doesn't know about. And then enter Juliet above at a window, or at her balcony. But soft, Romeo says. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold. 'Tis not me. To me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. Now you got to give it to Shakespeare there. That is some beautiful, beautiful stuff. And so let's go back and review the little monologue here. So he sees the light in the balcony, and then he sees Juliet entering. And so Juliet is the light. And he says she is the east, or it is the east, right? Her balcony is the east because Juliet is the sun. Now here, I normally pause and I ask my students, why the sun? And I believe that it's because the sun, as Galileo Galilei has told us a long, long, long time ago, is the center of the universe. And so by saying that Juliet is the sun, Romeo is acknowledging that she is now the center of my universe. And then he calls the moon envious, saying that because Juliet is so much more beautiful than the moon is sick and pale. That's why it's white. Because it's sad that it's not as beautiful as Juliet, the sun. And so then he continues on, right? And he says, oh no, she's, her eyes are speaking. Should I talk to her, right? So, he's saying, should I reveal myself and let her know that I'm here? And then he realizes, oh, but she's not really talking to me. And then I love the lines with the two stars. And so the idea here is two stars had to leave, right? They had to go somewhere, let's say vacation, right? They went to Dubai. And so they asked Juliet if they could borrow her eyes as stand-ins in the heaven. And he then starts to question, well, what if you took the stars and put them in Juliet's face? And he says Juliet's cheeks, the brightness of her cheeks would put those stars to shame, like the daylight does to a lamplight, right? If you go outside during the day and turn on a lamp, you don't see that light because the sun outshines it. Like here, Juliet's beauty outshines the sun. And then he says that she's so bright that birds who only sing during the day will start singing because they don't believe it's still night. And then that idea of being a glove on her hand to touch her cheek, man, I've been there before. I'm still there. But anyway, let's continue forward. So Juliet now, unaware that Romeo is there. So here's an exception to the rule, right? Because as we have talked about before, a soliloquy is when a character is on stage alone, speaking their private thoughts out loud so that we, the audience, know what they're doing, right? Because otherwise they're just up there laughing and giggling and we're kind of left out of the secret and that becomes boring, right? And so to let us in, Shakespeare uses the soliloquy, and it's still considered a soliloquy, even though Romeo is there, because Juliet doesn't know that he's there. If she knew that he was there, she would not say half the things that she says. She thinks she's alone. She's speaking to herself. And so, like us who are listening to her in the soliloquy, Romeo is also doing that. And so, still a soliloquy, even when there's another character there, because he has not revealed himself. So Juliet lets out a sigh, cheek in hand. Ay me. Romeo says, she speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being over my head as is a winged messenger of heaven, unto the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him, when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. She's an angel. Juliet then continues on in her reverie. O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not, be but sworn, my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. And so Romeo right there is like, what? So let's rewind a little bit. So her question is, why do you have to be a Montague? Refuse your name, right? Give up your family. Or if you won't give up your family, I will. Right? And again, go back to the way the mothers treated the fathers. Did she have an example of love? And so, to get out of that family, I think, she's just all more than willing to do. And so Romeo, so moved, is like, wow, shall I hear more or shall I speak at this, right? Should I just let her know that I'm here? Because she just basically said, that she'll be mine, that she will no longer be a Capulet, which means that she'll take my last name, which means she'll be a Montague, right? Or if I keep my mouth quiet, she'll tell me more things about me. So Juliet continues on. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thou thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part of a man. Nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. And so right there, she's basically saying out loud, I will be all yours if you would just change your name. Because it's really the name that's the problem. If you weren't a Montague, then, it's all good. But you're a Montague, and that's an enemy, and she gets a little perverted, talking about a name not being a part of any man or any other part belonging to a man, which you know exactly what they're talking about. And you really have to appreciate that line. That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That's beautiful. If Romeo was called John, he would still be just as good looking, right? It's just the name that's changing, not the face. Just like if you took a rose and called it poop, it'd still smell like a rose. And so she says, get rid of it. And to that, Romeo could not stay silent any longer. And so he jumps out of the darkness where he's hiding and he says, I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I never will be Romeo. Right? And so he's telling her, done. Right? I'll baptize myself, give myself a new name, maybe St. Thomas Aquinas or something like that. And so Juliet, you got to imagine, she thought she was talking to herself, and then the guy that she's talking about pops out of nowhere. Right? So she's scared to death. And so she says, what man art thou that thus bescreened in night, so stumblest on my counsel? Right? She hasn't figured it out yet that it's Romeo. And he says, by a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I written, I would tear the word. Which I love. And in my classroom, I'll write down Romeo on a piece of paper and I'll rip it up because that's what he means, right? If I could just write it down, I'd tear my name up so you knew, how serious I am, because I hate my name now because it is an enemy to you. And so right there, Juliet recognizes his voice and she starts to swoon. My ears have yet not drunk 100 words of that tongue's utterance. Yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo, and a Montague? Neither, fair saint, if either thee dislike. Right? So Romeo says, I won't be a Romeo or a Montague if you don't want me to. And she says, how camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? Right? Why did you come here, and how did you come here? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb. And the place death, considering who thou art, if any of my kinsmen find thee here. Right? She's like, they'll kill you. What are you doing here? And Romeo, of course, taking advantage of that opportunity, With love's light wings did I overperch these walls. For stony limits cannot hold love out. And what love can do that dares love attempt, therefore thy kinsmen are no let to me. All right, so he says, I'm not afraid of them. Let me catch me. Juliet says, if they do see thee, they will murder thee. And Romeo says, alack, there lies more peril in thine eyes than 20 of their swords. Look thou but sweet, and I am proof against their enmity. Sorry. And so he says, no, if you looked at me in any other way than the way you're looking at me now, you could crush me more than their swords could ever do. And Juliet says, I would not for the world they saw thee here. And so Romeo says, I have night's cloak to hide me from their sight. And but thou love me? Let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued wanting of thy love. All right, and so he says, if they're gonna, if they find me and kill me, then good. I'd rather die here next to you than live on and die later away from you. I mean, it's really pretty. Juliet says, by whose direction foundst thou out this place, right? Like, out of all the balconies and windows of this mansion, how did you know this was mine? Which was total luck, right? He just climbed the wall and boom, she's right there. But again, you got to take advantage of that opportunity. So Romeo says, by love that did first prompt me to inquire. He lent me counsel and I lent him eyes. I am no pilot, yet wert thou as far as the vast shore washed with the farthest sea, I would adventure for such merchandise. I mean, that's fire. That's hot right there, right? Even if you were at the farthest sea, I would still find you because you are worth it. So Juliet says, thou know'st the mask of night is on my face. Else would a maiden blush bepaint my cheek for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. Right? So she's going to go in a little monologue of herself, because remember, it's a monologue when there's somebody else. So now that she knows Romeo is there, and it's a conversation between two people, right? That's dialogue. But now she's going to go on a little bit of a speech. And I got to tell you, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and I think that's why Romeo and Juliet were yoked together. Paris maybe is more logical, which is why, maybe he's successful, but Romeo is sensitive and knows how to play with words, and Juliet loves wordplay. And so, you really gotta take this scene a little bit deeper than just, Romeo's shallow love, because the words they exchange, I mean, it is a testament to some really beautiful sentiments towards each other. That they would sacrifice and feign, and meaning fake and do things, just for the other one to, be happy. Isn't that what love is, right? Selflessness, sacrifice. I'll do and be and say whatever you want me to build you up, to make you the man or the woman, that you are meant to be by my side. I mean, that's fantastic. So anyway, so Juliet in those first 3 lines right there says, I am blushing like crazy right now. And it's a good thing that it's dark, because you would totally notice it, because you heard everything I said, and I pretty much said everything. I said that I would give myself to you. I said I would abandon my family for you. And so she says, fain would I dwell on form, fain deny what I have spoke, but farewell compliment, right? She's like, I've got nothing else to give you. You've already heard everything. I wish I could pretend that I didn't, but I have. And so, of course, realizing that Romeo knows that she loves him, what does she want to know? So she continues on. Dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye, and I will take thy word. Yet if thou swearest, thou mayest prove false. At lovers' perjuries, they say Jove laughs. O gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. Right? And so in those lines, she wants to know, is the feeling mutual? And she says, but don't swear by anything, because if you swear, then it's going to kind of make you look like you're lying, that you're just manipulating to get what you want. So if you love me, pronounce it faithfully. And then she starts to realize, or she continues, if thou thinkst I am too quickly won, right? If you think I'm too easy, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee nay, so thou wilt woo, but else not for the world. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my behavior light. But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more cunning to be strange. I should have been more strange, I must confess, but that thou overhearest ere I was ware my true love's passion, therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love, which the dark night hath so discovered. Right? And so, in other words, she's saying, if you think I'm too easy, right, because I don't want to come off as too easy, and maybe you want a challenge, then, I can pretend, and deny you everything and say, no, I don't want to go out with you, like Rosaline, maybe Rosaline is just playing hard to get to see, do you really want me? Are you going to work for it, kid? Because some guys like that. They want the challenge. And so she says, but I wouldn't want to do that for the world, right? I don't want to pretend like I don't like you. She admits to him, I'm very fond of you. And so because of that, you probably think, that my love isn't real because it's so fast, but I promise you that I will be more true to you than those who are smart enough to pretend to be, not interested can be. And so she says, so don't think that what I said, is just silly, young behavior, which I think deserves some respect. The fact that she even thinks about that, I think deserves a little respect. And so Romeo, you got to be moved by that if you're Romeo, right? And so he says, lady, by yonder blessed moon, I swear, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops, which it's like, come on, Romeo, she just told you don't swear or it's going to make you look like you're full of it. And so Juliet calls him out right there. She stops him mid-sentence and says, oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable. Which is really smart on Juliet's behalf. She's like, don't swear by the moon. The moon changes every night. Is your love going to be inconstant as well? And so Romeo's then like, well, what shall I swear by? Right? I got to swear on something to make you believe that I love you, I guess. So Juliet says, do not swear at all. Or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry. And I'll believe thee. So right there, you see Juliet is head over heels for this kid. She just basically said, you are my golden calf. You are what I worship now. They're two fools for each other. They're two peas in a pod. They deserve each other. What can I say? And even Romeo's moved and he says, if my heart's dear love. And again, Juliet, she doesn't want him to swear by anything. So she says, well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, and I'm going to pause here for a second because I really want you to pay attention to this part, because this is what I meant at the very beginning, that Juliet has this moment of clarity, this epiphany, where she is like Rosaline, one of the smartest characters in the play. But unfortunately, like the example she talks about with lightning, it disappears because Romeo says something that completely undoes everything that she was talking about. And I think she was right. She's got a great point. So we're going to talk about it afterwards. Just wanted to mention that. So here we go. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy of this contract tonight. It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning which doth cease to be ere one can say it lightens. Sweet good night. This bud of love by summer's ripening breath may prove a beauteous flower when next we meet. Good night, as sweet repose and rest come to thy heart as that within my breast. And so she basically says, I'm happy with you, but I'm not happy with this contract tonight of us swearing our love for each other. She says it's too fast, right? Too unadvised, too sudden, too rash. She uses this beautiful simile of lightning that as soon as you say, oh, wow, lightning, it's gone. And so she's like, I don't want this love to be like that, where tonight it's amazing and then tomorrow it's awkward. So she basically kind of pushes him off and says, so good night. This bud, this little baby flower, by summer's ripening breath, remember it's April, which is, spring. So let a season go by, let summer come, and if may prove to be a beauteous flower the next time we meet, right? It'll grow into something. And how is that possible? Well, because over time, because we don't have cell phones and text messages and instant messengers and crap like that prevent us from missing each other and realizing how important you may be in our life, they don't have that. They have nothing but time to think about the other person, and that's what they're going to do. I'll think about you, and if I meet somebody else and I think they're more interesting, well then, this was a nice night. But if I'm still thinking about you and you're still thinking about me, then we know it's true. We've given it time to kind of cool off from the passion. We know it's not just the passion. We know it's because you miss me in your life. You know that your life would be better if I were in it. And the same would go for me. So let's just wait a little. And maybe that's what Rosaline was just trying to do too, just putting him to the test and saying, how long will you wait? You say you love me. Is it because you want to have sex with me? Will you wait a day, a week, a month? How much am I worth to you? Will you wait a year? Will you wait a couple years? Will you wait until we get married? It was very smart on her behalf. So what is it that ruins it? Well, Romeo interrupts in typical teenage boy. Oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? Right? He's like, that's all I get? And Juliet, what a little whippersnapper, turns around and says, what satisfaction canst thou have tonight? Right? Like, what kind of girl do you think I am? And Romeo says, and saves it, and this is what just ruins everything for Juliet, because she forgets all of the smart advice that she just gave. And Romeo says, the exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. In other words, I want to get married. And Juliet says, I gave thee mine before thou didst request it, and yet I would it were to give again, right? So she says, before I even knew you were here, I already told you that I would marry you. And yet I wish that I could give you that answer again. And Romeo says, wouldst thou withdraw it? For what purpose, love, right? It's like you would take back all the things you said that you would marry me, that you said you would marry me. And Juliet, I love this. She says, but to be frank and give it thee again, right? The only reason I would want to take it back is only so I can give it back to you again and say, yeah, I will marry you. She says, my bounty, she says, and yet I wish but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. I hear some noise within. Dear love, adieu. And the nurse calls from within the house. And Juliet responds, anon, good nurse. Sweet Montague, be true. Stay but a while. I will come again. Right? So she's like, I'll be back. So she exits. Romeo now is talking to himself. And right now, all I could think about is, John Legend, Cloud Nine, where his heels are just touching the sky because he's floating on Cloud Nine. And he says, oh, blessed, blessed night. I am afeard being in night. All this is but a dream, too flattering sweet to be substantial. Right? And so he's like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe this is happening. I'm in love and she loves me and we're talking about marriage. So Juliet re-enters from above and she says 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee, where and what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy feet I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. All right, so in other words, I'm going to send somebody to you, Romeo, and you're going to tell them when and where are we going to get married. And then I'm yours. And the nurse again calls, Madam. So Juliet, a little annoyed, I come anon. And back to Romeo. But if thou meanst not well, I do beseech thee, right? So she's saying, if you're just messing with me right now. And the nurse says again, Madam. So Juliet responds, by and by I come to seize thy suit and leave me to my grief. Tomorrow will I send. Right? And so she says, I beg you, don't mess with me, right? Don't make this a fraud. And so Romeo says, so thrive my soul. Juliet says 1,000 times good night and exits. And Romeo says 1,000 times the worse to want thy light. Love goes towards love as schoolboys from their books, but love from love towards school with heavy looks. And so what does that mean there? Right? How do schoolboys go from their books? And all my students know it. Oh, they're very happy. Yes, they are. And so that's what happens when love goes towards love. They're very happy. How are schoolboys when they go towards the books and towards their school? And they're like, yeah, the heavy looks. They're not happy. So Juliet enters again, right? So there's a little surprise visit for Romeo. And she says, Hist, Romeo. Oh, for a falconer's voice to lure this tasseled gentle back again. Bondage is hoarse and may not speak aloud, else I would tear the cave where echo lies and make her airy tongue more hoarse than mine with repetition of my Romeo's name, Romeo. And so Romeo turns around and he says, it is my soul that calls upon my name. How silver's sweet sound lovers' tongues by night, like softest music to attending ears. He says, Romeo, my sweet, what o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee? By the hour of 9. I will not fail. 'Tis 20 years till then. I have forgot why I did call thee back. Romeo, I love this part right here. So Juliet's like, I came back for something else, right? I wanted to know what time to send the person. And remember this, because Romeo says 9 in the morning, right? And Juliet's like, bet, right? So we're going to do 9 o'clock in the morning. And then she's like, but I had something else I wanted to talk to you about. And Romeo says, well, let me stand here till thou remember it. And Juliet says, well, I shall forget, just to have thee still stand there, remembering how I love thy company. And Romeo back says, and I'll still stay, to have thee still forget, forgetting any other home but this. I mean, it's sappy as hell. All I can think about is when I was in high school with my neon landline phone, talking until 2 o'clock in the morning, arguing with my girlfriend. No, you hang up. No, you hang up. I don't want to hang up first. I love you too much. You hang up. It's like, golly. Yeah, I did that too. So anyway, and so Juliet says, 'tis almost morning. I would have thee gone, and yet no farther than a wanton's bird that lets it hop a little from her hand, like a poor prisoner in his twisted gyves, and with a silk thread plucks it back again, so loving, jealous of his liberty. And Romeo says, I would I were that bird. She says, sweet, so would I. Teens. Yet I should kill thee with much cherishing, right? So like Elvira from the Animaniacs, right? I would just smother you with love. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow. And she exits for the last time in this scene. And so Romeo leaves us with his last soliloquy. Sleep dwell upon thine eyes, peace in thy breasts. That's like saying to somebody sweet dreams before you hang up. Would I were asleep in peace, so sweet to rest. Hence will I to my ghostly father sell, his help to crave, and my dear hap to tell. All right, and so what is Romeo going to do? And he exits the scene. He's going to see his ghostly father. So what does that mean? A priest. And why would he go to see a priest? That's right. He wants to get married. He's got to tell whoever Juliet sends at 9 o'clock in the morning when and where. So that's the help he wants to crave, and he's going to tell him the story of everything that went down. So that's it for today, my Pachos Chachos. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I certainly have enjoyed going over it with you. I hope that you've been able to understand it a little bit better. And next week, we will go over Act 2, Scenes 3, 4, and possibly 5. I don't really remember how long they are. So we'll see how it goes. You know how I do. And I'll talk to you then. Pachos Chachos for life. God bless. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.